Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the sectors of the S&P 500. So if you're unfamiliar, here's a list of what the sectors of the S&P 500 are. There are 11 of them, and they go as follows: information technology, financials, healthcare, consumer discretionaries, industrials, communications, consumer staples, energy, real estate, materials, and utilities. And then next to all of these are the tickers for the SPDR sector ETFs that correspond to that particular sector. So like information technology, that's XLK, financials, XLF, healthcare is XLV, discretionaries is XLY, industrials is XLI, communications is XLC, staples is XLP, energy is XLE, real estate is XLRE, materials is XLB, and utilities is XLU. And then within the S&P, the sectors are not equally weighted. The S&P is a market cap weighted index, so you can see tech is going to take the strongest hold at 28.86%, and then utilities only have a 2.33% weighting, and then everything in between, even, with financials being the second, we'll call it 13%. That's still less than half of the weighting of information technology. So you can really see how large tech stocks are. And then something that every single person pays is utilities. And that's a fraction. It's only less than a tenth of what information technology is. So this just goes to show, maybe what you think is important in your life and that is true is not as important to the market. So that's just something to think about. So why are the sectors unequally weighted? By definition, the S&P is a momentum index because it's a market cap weighted index. It buys more of the best performing stocks and sells the worst performing stocks. So this means as the market cap of a company increases, so does its weighting within the S&P. That's why you see stocks like Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia all in the top 10 of the S&P. And because those are all part of the information technology sector, that's why the information technology sector is such a large weighting within the S&P. Little historical sector weighting. If you kind of read over on this left-hand side, you will see that there are only 10 sectors. Financials had a split a few years ago. They removed the real estate component of financials and made it its own sector. And then telecom was rebranded to communications, and some stocks such as like Apple, Google, and Meta were added to that. So that's why you see such a small weighting in telecom compared to what we're showing, on this one, 8.56, and then this one's only showing like 2.41. So this isn't a current one. This is about 6 years old, but it really just goes to show how the sectors kind of change over time within the weighting. So if we look at 1990, energy was near the top. Now energy is near the bottom. And then if we go to 99, within 10 years, tech went from being the lowest weighting to being the highest. This is the dot-com bubble, if you remember any of that. And then look at utilities. They went from 6.19 to 2.21. And if there's something else you kind of notice, you can see the dispersion of weightings from 1990 to 1999. It was a lot more equally spaced. Everything's kind of within a multiple of each other, a single multiple. But now you go to 1999 and there's a huge difference. Energy is almost 6 times less of a weighting compared to technology. And that trend has kind of continued. There's really been a concentration on a certain type of stock that's been outperforming, and it's really been heavy in the technology, financial, healthcare, consumer discretionaries. It's just something to think about. You do see a brief time of rotation, from 1999 to, to 2006. For about 7 years, tech went down in its weighting. During this time, financials were going up in its weighting. So it just goes to show that what happens today is not going to be the same as tomorrow. And you need to constantly be paying attention to what's going on in the market. So here's a breakdown of the actual sectors within the XLK, the technology sector. You can see you have kind of your big hitters are Microsoft, Apple. Here's Broadcom, NVIDIA, Adobe, Salesforce, AMD, Accenture, Cisco, and Intel. And these 10 stocks make up 70% of the index, of the sector index, excuse me. And there's roughly 30 stocks within here. So there's a large concentration within, specifically Apple and Microsoft. These make up we'll call it 45% of the information technology sector, which is a massive overweight. As these two stocks really, make their moves, that's what's going to drive the market. When you have such a large weighting, it just concentrates everything. And like if Broadcom went up 100%, yeah, that'd be dandy. But it's really not going to have much of a pull on the whole XLK as if Microsoft or Apple went up 100%. So if you're kind of looking to get into these sector ETFs, just think about the weightings and how those individual stocks are going to affect your performance. And then next up we have the XLF. So a lot less, about 50% less of the holdings are within the top 10. Only 54% of this ETF is made up of these 10 stocks, and you can see there's a better dispersion of percent net assets, with Berkshire being the largest at about 13%, and then BLK, BlackRock being the 10th largest at 2.19%. Within here we have Morgan Stanley, Goldman, S&P Global, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, MasterCard, Visa, JP Morgan. So you have banks, you have Berkshire is basically just it says holding company, but it's more or less just an insurance stock. JP Morgan, another bank, Visa, MasterCard, those are, credit card companies. S&P Global is who kind of runs a lot of the financial data that you use. And then Goldman and Morgan are more the investment banking and brokers. And then BlackRock is an asset manager, the largest one in the world if you haven't heard of them. Then we have healthcare. You have Eli Lilly, United, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, AbbVie, Thermo Fisher, Abbott, Pfizer, Amgen, and Danaher. And there's a lot of different sub-index industries within this sector. And then again, a little bit better, less concentrated portfolio, with Lilly and United really being neck and neck. Johnson & Johnson isn't too far away. Consumer discretionaries, you have Amazon, Tesla, Home Depot, McDonald's, Nike, Lowe's, Booking Holdings, TJX, which is TJ Maxx, Starbucks, and then Chipotle. This one's a lot more concentrated, a lot like the tech. You can really see that Amazon and Tesla kind of stick out as the largest holdings in here. And then industrials, this is the most diversified within all of the sector ETFs. Really nothing is too far away. Uber was a recent ad, and we have Caterpillar, Union Pacific, General Electric, Honeywell, Boeing, RTX, which is Raytheon, UPS, John Deere, and then Lockheed Martin. These are the companies that really produce all the things that you use. If XLY is the companies that you buy things from, XLI is the companies that sell those things to those discretionaries. Here is the communication sector. This is Facebook. This is Alphabet. This is Netflix, T-Mobile, Comcast, Verizon, Electronic Arts, AT&T, and then Charter Communications. This one's a little bit different than a lot of the other sector ETFs, just because there's such a wide kind of new economy versus old economy. AT&T and Verizon definitely don't scream growth, But when you look at something like Netflix, Alphabet, or Meta, these are companies that are really pushing the envelope and making new discoveries within the world as we know it. So this is an interesting ETF. The sector as a whole, they kind of just flushed in a few tech companies and then added in a couple telecom companies, which is they all kind of push out the same thing, but not really. These three are more like cloud, and these are old fiber. So that's an interesting ETF, and then also it has the highest weighting. You can really see that it's very concentrated, with Meta making up 24%, and then Alphabet, if you combine those, that's like 23%. So that's about 50% just within those two stocks. Consumer staples, these are the things you buy every single day. These are your grocery store items. You got Procter & Gamble making your Q-tips, Costco, where you buy your bulk meats, Coke, Pepsi, Walmart, Philip Morris, buying your cigarettes. Mondelez is like Oreos and stuff like that. Ultra is the United States version of Philip Morris. Colgate-Palmolive is your toothbrush and toothpaste, and then Target is where you go to buy all this stuff. And then energy, this one is also very heavily weighted within the top 10, with Exxon and Chevron really sticking out. Then you can see you got EOG, Schlumberger, Marathon, Phillips 66, Pioneer Natural, Williams Company, and then Valero. Real estate, Prologis, they're an industrial REIT. AMT, American Tower, they're the ones that actually own a lot of the data transmission towers that you see. A lot of the cell towers are owned by AMT. Equinix is a data center REIT. Welltower is a healthcare. Crown Castle is the same thing as American Tower. Simon Property and Realty Income are like the same thing. They own retail space. And then PSA, seen them all over the space, self-storage REITs. Materials, these are your more like miners and chemicals. You'll see a lot of copper, steel, and gold. Dow produces a lot of building materials. PPG does paint. DuPont does a lot of building materials. Linde does a lot of gases. Freeport-McMoRan is copper. Southern Copper is also another copper company. So that's kind of what makes up their materials. These are the raw materials that go into the industrials, and then the industrials are sold by your XLPs and your XLYs. And then last but not least, we have utilities. These could be multi-utilities such as Sempra. They do gas, water, and electric. But then other utilities are only electric. Some are only water. Some are only gas. So why do you care about the S&P 500 weightings? And who cares about them? So anyone that uses the S&P 500 as their benchmark is going to care about these weightings. These managers are either going to be overweight, meaning they own a higher percentage of a sector, underweight, meaning they own a lesser percentage of a sector, or equal weight, meaning they own a comparative amount of a sector compared to the S&P. So if you're a fund manager and tech makes up 28% and you have a 50% weighting, you're going to be overweight that sector, and you're going to hope that tech outperforms because you are overweight. If you're underweight, say utilities are 2.33%, you would have a 0% because you think utilities are a boring sector that don't really have a lot of returns. And then if you're equal weight, say you own however many percent of financials, and that's the same as the S&P, then you just think that the XLF is fine, nothing too special about it, but you do just want to make sure you're matching that return. Traders care about the S&P 500 weightings because they want to know where money is flowing. If you're consistently seeing that tech is outperforming, you're going to want to put your money there just because that's where you're going to get the highest alpha, the biggest return. And then passive investors, they want to know, how diversified is my portfolio? Are you too overweight a certain sector? Do you need to diversify and start adding to utilities? It's just something to think about. If at the end of the day, the S&P is really the current state of the large cap stock market. So if you want to be able to outperform those returns, you're going to need to have a different rendition of the sector weightings, and understanding what they are and how you can manipulate them is going to be the biggest way that you're able to get that outperformance. And then when do the sectors matter? So sector rotation, which sectors are outperforming? Market environment, risk on versus risk off. If it's a risk on environment, you're going to want to be long, things like tech, like the discretionaries, maybe a little healthcare. But if it's risk off, you're going to be long, more consumer staples and utilities. Dividend yield, is the dividend high or low for that certain sector? And then is the dividend growing or is it stagnant? So, all the different sectors have different dividend yields based on kind of a typical company within that sector. So you're going to want to look at that and see which one's going to pay you more, and if that's something that you're looking for, how that affects your portfolio. And then value versus growth. This is kind of the same thing as risk on, risk off, a little bit different. Value is going to be more like your utilities, financials, and energies. And then your growth is going to be more like tech, discretionaries, and healthcare. And then here's some 5-year analyzed performance of the different sectors. So over the last 5 years, this will be your single year performance. You can clearly see tech's been the best performing. It makes sense why it is the head and shoulders above the pack, being the highest weighting. You can see utilities have the lowest. It makes sense why it's the lowest weighting. And then you kind of get a different movement within the sectors. Materials have been doing well, but they're still not worth a whole lot. XLI has been doing well. It's the second best performing sector. So you can really see, why these weightings are what they are, just because of how well certain sectors have been doing. And then where can you stay current on the S&P 500 weights? You can go to any of these 3 websites. I'll make sure to post them in there. And then these will give you a daily weighting of all of the sector weights. So thanks for watching. If you got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat below.